Last year, researchers at the University College of London published a study in Neuron, which is a journal that's prestigious in the neuroscience space, with something that I think every intuitive person should hear. They discovered that the brain uses the same circuits for imagination and perception. What that means is the same region of the brain that's firing when you see something real is firing when you imagine it. Here's the kicker for anybody who likes to imagine or go off into imagination space. The more vividly you imagine something, the more likely that your brain was going to interpret it as real. In the study, when participants imagined things very vividly, they actually mistook those mental images for actual things that were sitting in front of them, even if there was nothing sitting in front of them. So how does this have to do with intuition? If you're using your intuition and you've gotten an intuitive hit, and your first question is, did I make this up? I want you to know your brain is literally designed to blur that line, to confuse you. It's not a personal failing, it's actually neuroscience. The question is actually not about trusting the information and am I making it up? It's actually about, can I work with my brain the way that it's built? That's what today's video is about. Hi, I'm Emily Snyder, psychic medium and intuitive teacher over at Connected Intuition. This question, intuition versus imagination, is something I deal with every single time we come to class. It really sits at the heart of intuitive development because I want to give you something more than just trust yourself, because I often say that and we do work on the trust, but let's work on the brain portion as well. So why is this genuinely hard? The thing that nobody tells you is that your intuition and your imagination are working through those same brain channels. Both communicate through words, feelings, impressions, sensations, through that same sensory system. It's going through the creative center of your brain. So what that means is it can feel identical, especially at first. So I've talked about this a lot, but the second part of this is that even if you get an intuitive hit and understand it, your imagination can take over and kind of finish the picture, finish the sentence, and keep going. You might get a fragment, something that's really true, but then your brain adds on the story. So then it can be hard to disseminate the truth from the story. The most important part of the work is understanding the first intuitive hit, the thing that feels real, that lands before you could think it, and stopping there. Later on in my fashion career, after I'd already studied at Arthur Findlay, but before I was ready to make the jump into this full time, I had 2 job offers on the table. That's a great place to be, having 2 job offers on the table. But to be honest with you, I didn't feel 100% great about either of them, but I followed my intuitive hit that one of them felt better than the other. I actually walked away from a bigger title and more money to work at a different company that felt like it resonated more with my values. But here is where my imagination got involved in the job. In my mind, I had then played out a perfect scenario of a lovely schedule, loving my job, loving every single person I worked with, great management styles all around. I was in a perfect position and loving every single thing about the job. Spoiler alert, that is not how it worked out. I did learn some key lessons that I needed to about several things in my life, as well as several things in the fashion industry, but it was not a rainbows and unicorns type of situation. Nothing looked quite like my vision. I came to understand that that initial hit was right. Everything after was complete fabrication on my part. Let's talk about some markers for your intuition versus your imagination. So, how did it arrive? Your intuition is always going to come very quickly and land very softly, but it should feel right in your body. Your imagination, on the other hand, involves some work. You are actually piecing things together, taking something someone said, piecing it along with a visual image to play out the movie in your mind of what is going to happen, to fill out that movie script and that picture into the full story. Here's a test to tell the difference between your intuition and your imagination. Think about a recent intuitive hit that you've gotten, either something kind of small about your day. So, like, well, how is your afternoon going to play out? Take that first impression of what you got and then ask for more. If you feel yourself reaching, that's probably your imagination. If you felt something land, that is your intuition. So if all of a sudden you're getting the full picture of what's happening, it's most likely your imagination. If you're getting a little sliver more or an image or a word, that's most likely your intuition. Said another way, if you're constructing it like a construction worker, it's definitely your imagination. If you're gifted it, it is definitely your intuition. The second marker I want to talk about is emotion. Emotion can be a nice gauge for us as to who is giving us the information. So often we talk about this with anxiety, where if it feels like, ooh, that's probably anxiety talking. But with the imagination, it's slightly different. Imagination can feel emotionally colored, like you're painting a picture, like you're in a movie with vivid colors being thrown on the screen, where your intuition should appear mostly neutral. That often surprises people, I would say, because your intuition you would think would arrive with positivity, but it's actually neutrality. It doesn't have a run on sentence, it doesn't ask you questions. It's only giving you that narrow scope of information it wants to, and that's the end of the story. Imagination, though, can go in all sorts of directions. It can paint you a picture, it can go 5 years into the future, it can look like a completely different story, and suddenly you've moved to Africa, changed your hair color, and given up on the book series that you've just recently loved, just because your imagination has played out all of these scenarios that you thought were your intuition. The other thing I will say is sometimes your imagination will give you the most hopeful scenario. So I'm not saying that your intuition doesn't sometimes give you hope. That's not true. But sometimes it gives you the most hopeful, convenient solution. So if you start to feel that in your body, if you can ask that question of yourself, is this the most convenient, hopeful version of something? It might be your imagination running wild. The third marker is an interesting one. What happens when you question it? So if you've got an intuitive download, or at least what you think is an intuitive download, start to question it, start to push back against it. When it's your intuition and it's something so clear as you're going to get a new job, period. It is hard for you to get much more from that if you start to ask it questions. When, why, what? It's just like, nope, that's the end of the sentence. Versus your imagination will start to paint more pictures, give you more information, maybe turn it into the rosiest colored glasses you've ever seen. Additionally, it could imagine yourself into a dark place as well, into a place that you don't want to go. Your intuition is stable and your imagination is unstable. This is actually connected to something that those UCL researchers found. The brain is interpreting your intuition as real, and it has something to do with that signal strength. If you're questioning it, it does not move. On the other hand, as you question your imagination, it starts to dissolve. For number four is your body's signal. Now, this is something you have to develop. So if you're brand new to your intuition, this is not one that I would suggest. But if you're someone who has used their intuition over time and has a sense of how your intuition feels in your body, most of us feel it like a settling or like a feather falling to the ground or like an exhale. Imagination, on the other hand, feels like effort. It is you outputting effort versus something being gifted to you and into your body. So it can feel like you're exerting something versus being received, but everybody is a little bit different. This can be one of the most useful things for you to develop for yourself to be able to tell the difference between your intuition and your imagination. How do you find that? It's all through practice. Noticing when you were correct and how that felt in your body, and then building on that the next time that you notice that you're correct, see what those physical sensations are. Continue to practice and repeat that until it feels like it is your response that you get every single time. In closing, I just want to say you're not always going to get it right. Your intuition is not perfection, it is definitely a relationship. And what the researchers told us is that your brain is literally meant to blur the line between reality and a made up imaginative world. The goal here is not to get rid of your imagination. It's just to know when the imagination is on and the intuition is off, and vice versa. For a lot of creative people, actually using your intuition to get a little bit of information and then your imagination kind of expands on it is not necessarily a bad thing. That is part of kind of a creative loop of information with your intuition. The goal here is to tell the difference so you know which one is happening, so that if your imagination takes over, you aren't trusting that as the truth in your body. If you want to build on this discernment and this accuracy with your own intuition, I have two opportunities coming up. I have an Intuition for Beginners class where we start from the absolute beginning, working on your connection, working on your clairs, working on building up that strength, and working with partners to really validate what you're feeling. The next thing I have is an 8-week intuition and psychic development course, which goes deeper. We go into the nuts and bolts of intuition, stretching what you've already got working for you and taking you to places you didn't know were possible. All of the information on my classes is available on my website at connectedintuition.com, and just click up on classes in the navigation. I'll also link to it below in the comments. If you have any questions, please reach out to me via email. I'm Emily Snyder, psychic medium and intuitive teacher. And as always, stay open, stay curious, stay connected with Connected Intuition, and I'll see you next week.